As a mom of 8 and the host of the Modern Motherhood Podcast on AllMomDoes, I want my kids to understand that it's a big world out there. I want them to develop empathy and caring. I want to show them how to be proactive in making a difference in the lives of other kids in the world, children who don't have the same opportunities for education, nutrition, housing, and medical care. And that's one of the reasons I'm so thankful to sponsor a beautiful little boy in Uganda with Compassion International. For a little over $1 a day, he's receiving physical, educational, and spiritual care. And for the kids I'm raising, they can see the difference it's making in his life through the letters he sends us and the pictures we get to see. For me as a mom, it's a win-win. And it's something you can do for your kids too. To give your kids the world, go to compassion.com/allmomdoes. I've got to admit, sometimes the thought of having more people over, of trying to come up with more food and ideas and having to clean the house, well, it can keep me from being my most hospitable. How about you? I'm Julie Lyles Carr. I'm the host of the Modern Motherhood Podcast from AllMomDoes. And today, my guest has a solution for those of us who sometimes want to be good neighbors, but get caught in a little bit of the, oh man, does this mean I have to clean? Does this mean I have to go shopping? All those things? You're just going to love her. She is Kristin Schell, and she's the one who's introduced us to the idea of the Turquoise Table. Kristin, thanks so much for being with us today.
I am thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
In your book and in your website, The Turquoise Table, you take an almost philosophical topic like being a neighbor and you give it true legs. And by true legs, I mean picnic table legs in the form of a table in your front yard. So how did the Turquoise Table in your front yard come to be?
I know it's only in Austin where our city motto is keep Austin weird, right? So I put an ordinary picnic table in my front yard and painted it turquoise because it's my favorite color in the hopes of having a place to meet with neighbors and gather really casually and informally. And it was born out of frustration, quite frankly. I started noticing in my own family sort of two things. One, this digital age that we live in. And so I realized the way we were not only communicating with one another and our family was changing, I realized it was changing in the way I was communicating with really good friends and peers and spending more time on digital media, Facebook and whatnot. I was longing for that face-to-face connection. And then the other thing I started noticing was that Tony and I had lived in our house a really long time, and I only knew about a handful of neighbors. And so there was this literal calling to a sense of place, kind of where I was, this rootedness in this is our home, this is where we were raising our children, and yet in some ways, it's kind of foreign to me. I don't know the people right around me. So kind of both of those things were going on in my mind, this new era of digital communication, and then this sort of change or feeling of unrootedness and where we physically lived. And so when the Turquoise Table idea came into my head, it came very winsomely. I actually didn't plan it. A table I had ordered online from Lowe's. It's that ordinary picnic table that you've seen everywhere. And I ordered it for a backyard barbecue I was having, and I needed some extra seating. And so when it arrived, the Lowe's delivery guys just plopped it down in my front yard because it's heavy. And they came to the door and they said, "Ma'am, where do you want this table? Where can we put it for you?" And it was this aha moment. I saw this ordinary, everyday table right there in my front yard. And it was like, it was aha. I wondered, could this be just a winsome, easy place for us to gather? And that's how it started.
I love it. So where did the turquoise color come from?
Well, turquoise is my favorite color.
Well, there you go. So it's not like some ancient wisdom color, or is it?
I did find that out later. So, of course, I just liked it, So I thought, well, turquoise is happy, and it's my favorite. But then later on, after the people had started kind of following and learning more about the Turquoise Table, someone told me that in Native American culture, it's the color of friendship.
Wow.
So according to the Google,
which is authoritative overall. Yes.
It's authoritativeness. No, but it is. And I think, how fitting. I love that. And so I wasn't smart enough to know that early on. I just liked turquoise, but I love that it represents friendship.
When did you begin to realize that this was taking hold both within the neighborhood dynamic. Right. But then when it really caught gear and you started realizing this was starting to move far beyond just your block, what was that like?
Well, okay, so I put the table, it's been like 4.5 years. So in the fall of 2013 was when the table arrived, and I painted it and put it out front. And really early on, after we'd had one or two of our gatherings, I invited some of our neighbors. I figured, there's this turquoise table in my front yard. Maybe I should explain, And so I invited a few of the neighbors I did know. And they came over and we were chatting, and I told them sort of my hypothesis, which was, what if we were to take our ordinary activities, things we're already doing? We have to eat dinner. In our case, we were doing homework. We were already having like bake sales. We were already doing activities. What if we were to take things we were already doing, but do them in our front yard in a more visible way that might invite others to join us or curiosity? And so that was kind of the hypothesis. And I said, what if we were to call ourselves front yard people? And so that was sort of the dare or the what if. And sitting around the table that morning, there were 4 other women, and I expected them to think, oh, this is kind of cool. We like this. We'll come to your house for pizza or happy hour or whatever. But what I never expected them to do was literally pull out their phone and order their own turquoise tables. And so I went back inside and went, they asked permission. Like, well, can we get one too? And I was like, I didn't see that coming. I was like, well, of course you can. I mean, it's yes. So then that week or the week after, it happened to be my sister-in-law's birthday, and she lives in San Antonio. And so I was telling Amanda about the turquoise table, and same reaction. She was like, oh, can I get one too? And so really quickly, I mean, early on, there was something, that was very sticky about it. And that was convicting to me because what it did was, well, first of all, I didn't feel alone in my own frustrations.
Right.
Obviously it was scratching an itch that other people were feeling as well. And that we want a place to belong. We long for community. We long for connection. And yet it's hard. It's really hard. And so we needed a simple, easy way to make it happen.
Right. Some kind of hub, some kind of center.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It was interesting. My next door neighbor who had lived next to me for about 10 years, they recently moved to a different home, just a little bit of ways from our house. It was so hard to see them go. The kids were back and forth all the time and all of that. And this new family moved in, and they moved in from California. And one of the first things they unloaded was a turquoise table. And I just cracked up. I was like, I have got to tell Kristin, this is so interesting that the new neighbors that I need to make sure I'm being welcoming for, they've actually brought one of Kristin's tables to the...
Oh my gosh, it's almost like I'm your neighbor then.
I know, exactly. Every time I pass by it, I'm like, hey, Kristin.
So I love that.
I do think this neighboring component, though, is really interesting. I grew up moving all over the U.S., and we had communities in which it seemed very, very welcoming, and we had communities that seemed a lot more transient, and so it just kind of depended. And it had been my strong intention to not move anymore. And Mike and I lived for several years in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I didn't intend to go anywhere. And then the Lord or Mike or both had other plans, and we ended up making a couple of moves that finally landed us here in Austin. And it is interesting. I mean, neighboring in general, to me, has changed. And I think part of it is due to the digital landscape. I think that's part of it. But I also think we have communities in which relocation is happening more and more. And people, don't always stay in the same house for the duration of their years raising their kids or whatever, even if they stay within the same community. And so I'm curious what's kind of your snapshot of the current neighboring landscape, because I do think digital is one issue, but do you think we're getting a little more hesitant to reach out, or have you lived in communities that seem to be more that welcome wagon kind of a culture? What do you think that is?
Well, and so my experience obviously was born out of the frustration of raising 4 children in the digital era. And so that's sort of what prompted it with me. However, now I talk to communities all across the country. And so there's several things. You mentioned it with transient, in generations past, you had a job and you stayed with that job and you retired with a gold watch. That is no longer the norm. And so people's jobs move. And so that causes families to uproot and move. Even little things like just the way architecturally, homes are designed. There used to be front porches.
Right.
Well, garages were not necessarily designed. They were necessity because we didn't have air conditionings. And so then with the advent of air conditioning, so went the front porch in a lot of times. Small things like where we have now in subdivisions, even the mailboxes are all clumped in one big hub. And so you don't even no longer can even see the mailman on some days. And so all of these things are small and subtle, and yet adding up, they affect how we neighbor. When I was growing up, we didn't have fences between the houses. And so then I remember when we put the chain link fence in. But a chain link fence was because there were dogs next door, but you could still see through and they were low. And so now there are these privacy fences that you have to, they're almost as tall as the roof line. So subtle things that in and of themselves are not bad. However, it changes the way we just intuitively interact with people.
Absolutely.
That was what I was noticing in my own neighborhood. I noticed that garage doors would go up and garage doors would go down. We're certainly friendly and we would wave. And we had an incredible Memorial Day block party. And everyone would show up and it was certainly fun. But I noticed that as soon as the coolers and the lawn chairs were kind of put back into the garages, it was kind of one and done. So those relationships weren't really happening. We're busy. We're all busy. And I think that we sort of glamorize or idolize generations past, but you have to have margin to build relationships. And if you don't have margin or white space on your calendar, then no wonder we're lonely and isolated or can feel that way.
I think one thing too that I have been guilty of in the past is I was making a neighboring event too complicated. And I think that's part of the genius of the Turquoise Table, because it's sort of like, bring whatever you got in the pantry and come cop a squat. And let's just talk. Because, I would feel like, well, I've got to scrub everything down and I've got to make this 7-course whatever. And of course, you're an amazing cook, but just that place where I was making it too hard. And I learned a great lesson. My husband, Mike, one day said, I'm going to have just a little cookout for the neighbors. And I said, okay, so I'll need to get to Sam's and I'll need to get this. And he said, no. And he on a random Saturday, drug our grill from the back porch to the front yard and just started telling people up and down the street, hey, bring your grill and bring some hot dogs, whatever you've got to grill, and let's just all grill out. I turned around twice and there were, I don't know, close to 40 or 50 people in my front yard. I'm thinking, if anybody wants to go to the bathroom, they're going to have their tetanus shot updated before they walk in this house. I hope nobody needs a restroom. And it was just there was just no major planning. There was nothing spectacular about it, but the freedom of just saying, just come on over and forget all of the complexities and the layers and all that kind of stuff. It kind of gave me a new lease on how to just lean into neighboring and not feel like so much had to be on me, that it had to be some kind of episode of, food TV or something.
Right. Well, absolutely. And we put that sort of perfectionism, wherever it comes from in each of us, it's there. So this was really sort of the dance that I have and continue to have with the Lord of kicking that perfection to the curb. And it is a discipline of trust to show up with just what I have and just say, here I am. But the freedom in that, and then the welcome in that others receive when they come as they are, and they don't have to prepare either. It's so subtle, but it's hard. I mean, it's hard to think, well, I'm not going to make dinner or I'm not going to bring out something, because I'm going to say I tend, in my default mode is human doing. I'm doing this. Right, I've got this, this. And really the freedom I've learned at being at the table is just back to being a human being. Just be, show up and be present.
Be present. I love that. Now, you referred to your frustration watching your kids getting into those digital screens instead of face to face. And of course, a lot of our kids are conducting far more of their relationships through the means of the digital platform. So how are you actively equipping your kids for neighboring and for hospitality in a culture that doesn't always really exemplify that now when it comes to relationship building?
Well, one of my favorite quotes that actually sort of launched the whole journey to the Turquoise Table for me comes from our friend Jo Saxton. And she was speaking at a conference that I heard her, and the context is discipleship. And she said, you can't be what you can't see. And I love that, because you can't be what you can't see in many ways. And so to me, I can tell my children all day long, get off your cell phones, or you're only going to have Snapchat hours for this 30-minute, or I can mandate all of this, but they have to see it in us too. And I realized that I was just as tethered and can be just as tethered to my screen or to my phone. And I could say it was work, or I could justify it 100 million different ways, but they need to model that. It's so simple. We call it our eye basket, like our eye device or our eye basket.
Right. I love that.
So we started this eye basket, and all devices go in, and it was just at dinner time, but now at the Turquoise Table. And, even now when the kids come over, and they're all, and the older 3 are in high school, so they're all Snapchatting or doing whatever it is they're doing. And I'll say, girls, y'all are together. Like, here's the eye basket. And it's uncomfortable at first. And my teenagers roll their eyes because I'm the house, that invites you to unplug and actually be present. But it works. And once they realize, hey, we can do this, we don't have to hashtag every moment. It's real and it's good. And it's baby steps. They're still on their phones. So we haven't, and they will be, but modeling and teaching them. Quite frankly, I was scared. I was scared they wouldn't be able to have a conversation. I mean, you've got kids this age. They walk in and they go sup, or they're sending you emojis, and you're like, what do you mean sup? Sapnin? I mean, like this whole teenage conversation thing was going on. And I was like, I really need to know in my heart that yes, they love Jesus, but that they can also say something more than emojis.
Yeah.
And unplugging in small, meaningful moments. Now they do it on their own too.
Right. Well, and conversation is an art. I mean, that means it has to be practiced, and there are nuances, and there are those face-to-face moments that you just have to experience to gain the experience to know how to be a strong conversationalist. So I think it is important to create
and back to, your point earlier, I am the queen of making things hard. And I get into this trap. I call it analysis paralysis. And so I will, but this, or we should try this, or, and I'll spin my circles until I'm just exhausted. This is a fun little example that happened just really recently. One of the girls had, I think there were 6 or 8 of them sitting around the table. And those little conversation boxes, like with the cards on it?
Yes, we keep one on our kitchen table, actually.
Okay,
yeah.
So we do too.
Yeah.
So we do too. But we'll pull it out, like sort of those when I'm just flat exhausted and desperate for conversation. But it always feels a little stiff or a little contrived. I don't know. We don't use them on a regular basis. But let me tell you what, I came down the stairs, rounded the corner, and those girls were there with that box of conversation starters, howling, laughing, asking each other these questions. And I was like, of course, I wanted it to be more profound or more, meaningful. And yet there they were with this simple, ordinary box of conversation starters for like an hour. So it is simple. Simplicity is kind of our motto at the Turquoise Table. Just keep it simple.
It makes me think about that, we need as human beings sometimes those prompts. And I think the Turquoise Table in and of itself is a prompt. And I think conversation starters, those boxes, are a prompt. And by the way, here's another business idea for you, since you've already got a million flying around. How about some Turquoise Table conversation starters?
How about?
Those.
I know. I'm the creative idea slinger, and then I can't figure out how to implement them. It's been on my bucket list for forever. So if one of your fabulous listeners wants to help me create those, call me, because it's on my wish list for sure.
We'll figure that out. We're going to figure that one out.
Oh.
We'll be right back with our interview with Kristin Schell of the Turquoise Table. But first, I want to make sure that you know about MOPS. For over 40 years, MOPS has been inviting women into community through the commonality of motherhood, building friendships, and earning the opportunity to share Jesus with them, maybe for the first time. MOPS believes that all moms are world influencers and exists to encourage and equip all moms everywhere to live their best lives. Check out mops.org to find a local gathering in your neighborhood. Now, it seems a shame to even bring this up when we're talking about opening our hearts, opening our homes, opening up our schedules to be better neighbors. And yet at the same time, we know that we also may have some people in our neighborhood who might not be the safest to have around our kids or our homes. So how do you encourage, let's say your kids, let's stay right there. How do you encourage your kids to be good neighbors while also instilling a sense of safety and wisdom and appropriate boundaries?
Well, and obviously that's so key. And we teach kids these days stranger danger and how to respond to people that come in and out of the neighborhood who may try to talk to them or offer them candy or whatnot. And so there's a general sense of awareness that we have to have. So I would never advocate go into an unknown place or go knock on a door that you know just might not receive yourself or children with love and safety. And again, it would depend on the ages too. Early on, whenever we would go introduce ourselves to someone, I would be with them or Tony would be with them. And so it's age appropriate. Now, I will say, just a couple weeks ago, we had new neighbors move in across the street. And I was in the kitchen and cooking or doing something. And Sarah, our youngest, said, "Mom, have you been over to the new neighbors yet?" And I said, "Yes, I went over I was on moving day. And so I haven't been back over formally." And she goes, "I'm going over." She walked over, rang the doorbell, went into their house, and she was our little ambassador, speaking of kind of modeling and being what they can see. Now, I knew that was going to be fine. I knew that this was going to be a house that would most likely, but I didn't know them. I'd only said hello once. Right. And so you just have to have a general awareness. There are some houses in our neighborhood that we know have activities or things going on that wouldn't be appropriate for children. I have no hesitancy going there, but I'm not going to send my children.
Right.
So I think that you just have to have a conversation, which is the whole point of the Turquoise Table. If this comes up and if there are places for strangers that you need to have these conversations, give them wisdom. Tell them where are the safe houses you can go to if you ever encounter something that doesn't feel off.
Right.
And it's just being aware and having the open dialogue so your kids can come to you when it arises.
Right. Well, I think that wisdom piece is really important. And, there are tools out there that you can kind of see if there are people who have different records and stuff have moved in. I know there's controversy about those, but I think as moms, we owe it to ourselves to be prepared
Absolutely.
to know who's around us. And then that allows us that confidence to feel like we can be more open and reaching out to people if we've done the work ahead of time to prepare, knowing who's around us and where we live. And for our kids to understand, we generally want to approach those who live in our general community with an open hand, but we also have wisdom that goes along with it. I think those are great pieces of advice for parents that you've given, Kristin. So what is now your definition of hospitality? Because, look, by reputation, you are the hostess with the mostest. Everybody knows this. So you are the Williams-Sonoma cover girl. So that had to have played into your idea of hospitality originally. Has your idea of hospitality changed through this journey of the Turquoise Table since the fall of 2013?
Absolutely, it has. And so I went into this with a clear and just an understanding of entertainment. What I have learned through this journey is that there is a vast difference between entertainment and hospitality.
Ooh, say it again. That's so good. Say it again.
There is a vast difference between entertainment and hospitality. Just for a little context, I was born and raised in my formative years in the 70s and the 1980s in Dallas, Texas. And so big hair and big parties and everything big. And so I knew entertainment. I come from a long line of gracious and generous hostesses. But I needed some honing and refining and shaping and molding to what hospitality is. Hospitality, the Greek root, is love of strangers.
Oh,
and so when we think about strangers, as we sort of think about neighbors, sometimes strangers are literal strangers, like the people we were just defining, people we might be leery of or don't know. Sometimes strangers can be the people very closest to us. Mm-hmm. I have gone through, seasons in my marriage and as a mother where I have a child that feels like a complete stranger to me, or my spouse, Tony, and I will be like ships passing in the dark, strangers. Right. And so we're called to love all iterations of strangers. So really learning the difference in that. And I like to define it as just from that Greek root. When we think of hospitality as love of strangers, that puts the emphasis on service and loving others and puts the blessing on the guest. Entertainment is, think about just the word entertainment. It's mm-hmm. You're coming to be entertained, and it puts me on a stage, and it puts me as the star. There's an opportunity and a time for both, but what the Lord had to teach me and is still daily reminding me and teaching me that I am called to hospitality. And people always say, well, I don't have that gift of hospitality. And what I like to say to that is, no, maybe you don't have the gift or the desire for entertainment.
Right.
We are all called to love love strangers.
Right.
And so whether you're an introvert, extrovert, like to cook, don't like to cook, that has nothing to do with hospitality. When we look back in first century Christendom, hospitality, this love of strangers, was practiced as the apostles were going out and spreading the word, and they had to travel, obviously, via foot.
Right.
And so there were safe houses that they knew by word of mouth that they could go to. And so let's say, I'm coming to your house, because I knew y'all were a safe place. Well, what you would provide me was a warm and a safe place. I mean, we're talking safe from persecution, not safe from the elements, although that would be nice. And maybe just whatever you had, some bread or some water or wine or whatnot. It says nothing about throwing a huge party. So when we think about all we're really called to do is to create a safe environment for people to come and maybe have some water, whatever we have on hand, it's a whole game shifter to me, or it was for me, to how we receive people that come into our lives.
That's just huge, that distinction between entertainment and hospitality, and where the focus naturally lends itself depending on which one you are engaging. I absolutely love that. We know that Jesus talked a lot about being a good neighbor, and why do you think that is, and why is neighboring still important in our modern age, particularly in a city that has lots of people moving in and out all the time? Does the ancient message of neighboring, how does it still apply today?
Well, I think we were not created by God to live in isolation. He created us for him and for one another. And so, whether that is our literal neighbor, that is the best proximity that we have to be in community with one another, or whether it's, extended family or whatnot, we are not designed to live in isolation. I think it's incredibly important right now when, statistics tell us that we're lonelier than ever as a nation, or, even a generation. And for whatever reason, we have to work at it a little bit. And that's hard. It's not going to come fall in our laps, these relationships. But I believe, as believers and non-believers alike, we're called to take care of one another. There's a great quote that I love from Mother Teresa, and it says that when we feel no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to one another.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I love that because sometimes we need a mother to come in and wag her finger and say, you guys behave, mind your manners, treat each other like you love each other. Even if you're not getting along all the time, have differences, of course. But we've lost this sort of sense of just treating each other with dignity and grace and respect. And Jesus knew that. He knew that was going to be our downfall, our sin pattern, our trap. And that's why I believe, that it was so simple. Love God, love others, and yet so hard.
Right. And still can be so tricky, even as simple as it is.
Right.
Now for the mom out there, and we've alluded to this, but give some top tips to the mom out there who's saying, I'm already overwhelmed. The schedule is wall to wall, and I'm trying to work and take care of kids and make sure all the homework's getting done and get everybody to soccer with some kind of semblance of matching shin guards on. What are just some practical, easy ways that she can engage her community without just busting her spirit?
Right. No, and let me say, that is where I was. And so truthfully, I knew all that we have talked about sort of in my brain, and sort of as head knowledge. And it was just a desperate plea to the Lord. It was like, well, then show me how to do this. And I believe that, how wonderful of him to give me a table. It's a communion table is really what it is. Right. I call it, though, the greatest hospitality hack ever, because here's why. You do not have to have clean kitchen counters. You do not have to prepare a meal. Your laundry can be everywhere because nobody's coming inside.
Right.
So we're going to do all this outside. There's great freedom in that. There's really little or no preparation. And so my advice is, what are you already doing? What are you already doing? Because like you said, we don't have time for one more thing. And so, for example, we have to raise money from time to time for our school projects, right? For school or for church or for whatever. And so we've made all the art projects outside, and we've hosted classes to come over because guess what? Glitter in the front yard is not glitter on the dining room table. Let me tell tell you, we just may have solved all the world issues right there.
Brilliant.
And so we now have an Easter egg dyeing party out front. So being outside, there's just a great freedom in that. And so what are you already doing? What's something, if you look at your calendar and you have to do it anyway, you have to feed your children. Well, then order pizza and eat outside, at the picnic table and see what happens. And I have yet to have anyone say, I have sat out at my table consistently and never engaged anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
So that hasn't happened. Now, some people, it happens faster. It happens, more quickly and on different levels, but you will meet someone or it will happen. And it can be so, so simple. I always like to say, notice what's going on in your neighborhood too. Like, what are the daily habits sort of people? Are there lots of dog walkers? I originally noticed there were so many dog walkers in our neighborhood. So I just put a simple dog bowl out filled with water. I didn't even have to consult Pinterest. Like, are you proud of me? Like, I did that by myself. Like, truthfully, I'm here to keep the bar really low, and so it's like, I can't believe I get to share these ideas because it's like, wow, put a dog bowl out. But notice what's going on in your neighborhood. And here's the hard part. The hard part is then actually doing something about it and actually showing up. But the beauty of that, we all know, is when you do show up, you go to the events you didn't want to go to because you were tired and your cup is so filled. That's what will happen in your neighborhood, in your front yard. I 100% promise it because it's not my promise. It's God's promise.
My office is on the front of the house. And so I am able to see a lot of that neighborhood routine that you talk about. Yes. And I do know who's going to be traveling by and which dog belongs to who. And we actually have a couple of neighbors that their cats walk with them, which I never fail to marvel at. Quite fascinating.
I haven't seen that yet. That's a new one.
Pretty interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I will take the time. We have a very shallow front porch, but I will sit out there. And generally, if I'm really on a writing bent, you'd be amazed how many people will stop and talk to you when you're really trying to get something down creatively.
I know.
But, the kids string their Enos through the trees. The kids are up and down. And part of it is because I still have younger kids. They're naturally outside more, which has allowed me to engage more, which is really good news for our overwhelmed moms who have younger kids. If you'll just get out on the front porch and watch your kids skateboard up and down, you're probably going to engage some people. But with the older kids, it is something more of an intention to be out on that front porch and to be more available. And you're right, though. People do want to have that casual conversation. It makes everybody in the neighborhood feel a little better when they have a chance to chat and say hello. And there are a few people I only know by a wave or by their dog, but it's nice. It's nice knowing who's living around me. So such great thoughts. Now, I'm really excited about this. You have a brand new podcast called, of all things, The Turquoise Table with Kristin Schell. So tell us about that and where everybody can find it.
Yes. I mean, it's brand new and we're so excited about this. And the reason behind it too was what better way to continue the conversation with our community than through a podcast. And, there are now turquoise tables in all 50 states and 8 countries.
Awesome.
And so it was crazy to try to figure out how to respond and engage and keep the conversation going. And so we're trying it. We're trying it out. And so on iTunes and anywhere you listen to podcasts, we're there. And certainly you can find everything on my website. We're starting simple with it and have incredible guests that really just help set the table, so to speak, on why table time is important and what neighborhooding really looks like. And so real practical interviews and visits. And then we always have recipes, some conversation starters. And so, our idea is to model the table conversation for whoever is chiming in and listening, because I do believe it goes back to that quote from Joe Saxon, you can't be what you can't see. And we all need a friend, right? To kind of help us and encourage us. And so that's what we're doing with the podcast.
I think that's fantastic and such a great place for people to start who are listening going, this all sounds great, but I'm hesitant. I'm shy. I don't know. That's a great resource. So the Turquoise Table with Kristin Schell, new podcast, and we'll make sure and link to that in the show notes so our listeners can find it. And then you've already had some things come out with Tuesday Morning, and you've got a new line that's come out. Tell us about what we're going to find, the Turquoise Table line, that those products are going to be available as well.
Okay, so we have the Turquoise Table collection with Tuesday Morning. And y'all, it is so fun and exciting because everything that we have curated we listened and we actually did a survey and we asked. And so this year, when the new collection comes out, there were a whole bunch of people asking for some sort of citronella candle for mosquitoes. So we have this great citronella candle. We have all kinds of just easy and affordable totes, things to carry out to your table. I always love to keep a basket of all the leftover napkins and leftover paper plates or things that you might regift. I mean, we're never going to say that out loud, but like things, you get that beautiful set of something and you think, oh, I'll just keep this in that basket. So you kind of have like just all your provisions ready. So you're not digging through the junk drawer looking for something spontaneously. So we've created just fun, inexpensive things to make it easier for you just to walk out and see who shows up.
That's awesome. So excited about all the things with the new podcast, the new line coming out with Tuesday morning. Thank you for modeling for us so well the art of neighboring and neighboring well at the Turquoise Table.
Thank you, Julie. Oh, what a treat to be here.
Be sure and check out Kristin's website at KristinSchell.com, and that's Kristin, and then Schell is spelled SCHELL. So that's KristinSchell.com. You'll also find all of her social media handles there as well, and find out how you can engage in this turquoise table phenomenon that Kristin has started, encouraging all of us to reach out and to know our neighbors and get to know the people around us. And I would love to connect with you too on all the social media places. I'm Julie Lyles Carr, both website, JulieLylesCarr.com, and then on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Would love to see you there. All Mom Does. That's where we really want to help you get connected, get you engaged in that community. AllMomDoes.com. It's a community of fantastic bloggers with all kinds of great information for the life you're living, the marriage that you're in, the kids you are raising. AllMomDoes.com. They are so fantastic and want to make sure that you engage over there as well. Big shout out to Donna Tody. She is our producer, and to Rebecca Beckett. She's our content coordinator. They are the ones who help get this podcast out there every week. And so a big thank you to them. We want to make sure that you're subscribing. It means so much to us and helps us get the word out about the Modern Motherhood Podcast. If you would just take a second and give us a great 5-star rating and leave a review, that means so much and helps other listeners find this content as well in somehow all of the, mystical way that the podcasting thing works. So please take just a minute and let us know that you're listening along through your subscription and through your review. Next week, coming up on the podcast, we have another Kristin who's going to be joining with us. Her name is Kristin Welch, and she is someone who is very passionate about making sure that we're raising kids who are grateful, who understand what it means to go into the world and help change it. And we're going to be talking with her next week about the things that she's learned along the way with an international ministry and with raising her tribe. So we'll see you next week on the Modern Motherhood Podcast.